It is time for Weather and Ag in Focus. So glad that you are taking time out of your afternoon to join in, hear what's going on in weather, farming, and all other items around us. I'm Ag Director Bridgette Readel, finally on my way back from Montana. I am currently close to, I think this is Rosebud, Montana. In fact, the fun facts little sign in front of me says I'm getting close to Miles City because it talks about a former Air Force station here. I'll get those details later because y'all want to follow along, right? According to what the weather looks like back home, it's about 69 degrees. I'm seeing it much better here in eastern Montana. It's about 76 over here. Today seems like a day we might get into the upper 70s. Let's see how that rolls. Tomorrow, 40% chance of rain on Friday. Interesting to note, while I've been gone, over over a half inch of rain at my house in northern Cass County. So things are improving in the moisture department, probably to the point where some folks are like, whoop, whoop, turn it off. That's enough. So we'll see what we get for rainfall Friday night into Saturday. Sunday, we're actually going to hit 90 degrees again. And next week, stay warm. Monday, back to 96. Whew. Addison, you and I are not the people built for that. We're not ready for
I'm
it.
just gonna melt.
I'm going to do my best, but I am not guaranteeing how it's going to go.
Same.
Just a heads up. Just a heads up. So, all right. Meanwhile, for the rest of you who are looking forward to some warm weather, we are pretty much going to hear the crop pop. You're going to physically be able to hear corn grow with the moisture that we have had and now with these really warm temperatures coming up. And even though I'm not your meteorologist, there is your hauling manure day forecast because maybe that's what some of you are doing. If you're not baling hay, if you're not spraying a crop, if the wind is down, maybe it's time to clean out the feedlot and get manure out of there. For those with questions, comments, and so forth, love to have you join on the JLA insurance phone line. That number is 701 293 9000. Yesterday, had some folks take part in the show by calling in for Wednesday weather trivia. Also, just comments on the topic at hand. And thanks for anybody who does that. Love to have you call in, chat with whatever is on your mind as well when it comes to farming and weather in the region. And again, that's 701 293 9000, the JLA insurance phone line. Email me, ag@flagfamily.com, or go ahead and watch because you're going to get the whole view of what's happening behind me here at the rest stop near St. Let's see, I'm either close to Miles City or not far from Rosebud. I don't remember, but I took the exit. And so you can find us on that live stream brought to us by Lighthouse Commodities. Thanks to YouTube, Facebook, Acres TV is where we're at. Well, now, speaking of those headlines, as I made mention of, what's going on in them? Y'all know that I am a very big fan of what we do in FFA every day. And because of that, today's first story I want to talk about, I thought was incredibly relevant considering the skill set that these kids are picking up. So let's go to Mississippi. We're going even further south. So Mississippi is just one of a multitude of southern states that have been battling wild hogs. Thousands to the millions of dollars of damage and spreading disease amongst livestock. Mississippi State Extension says that state farmers suffer around $66 million a year worth of property damage. That's just a portion of the $1.5 billion USDA attributes to wild hogs across the entire United States. With populations of these wild hogs spreading across all 82 counties in the state of Mississippi, people wanted to do more to trap those hogs. Mississippi Department of Conservation deploys a wild hog control program. Farmers and landowners can report damage and receive access to a smart trapping and bait system that will remotely capture hog populations. An extension of that is the state of Mississippi made $30,000 grants available to FFA programs offering funds to create and mobilize a trapping service for their own communities. Wild hogs cause an estimated $66 million in damage in farmland, as I mentioned earlier. And so what happened in Smithville High School was the students applied for the grant and took advantage of it. They have bought smart cameras, trapping technology, pre-made traps and supplies to make the traps, such as buy welding equipment in order to be able to do this. And then they took in the training in order to be able to operate the traps. So what they call their trapping corps then went on to earn money back from the conservationists because when they were turning in these hogs for disposal, I think we could say, students were finding out that they could get the money to use for travel for state and national programming. So they've built their own traps, they have trained them, and they're students that not only picked up the skills of building, training, watching the cameras, the smart maps, all of those things, but even when it came to thinking about a future in wildlife management, students are putting in that effort as well. They've trapped up to 64 hogs in a 2-year period, and they said that's setting up the trap about 5 different times. The majority of those usually have been caught around February, March, or October. It's right around freeze time and right before spring where the hogs really get active. And again, so many learning opportunities, not just at Smithville, but also another high school, Puckett. They've been doing it. They have more than 50 kids of their 200 in their high school that have been involved in a diversified ag and natural resources class. So this has been part of their classroom activities. And they're gaining the importance of protecting the farmland, especially the disease control aspect when it comes to livestock, because those hogs do spread quite a bit. And they're learning to write grants and fundraise as well. That ties in a little bit with what we can talk about when it comes to FFA in North Dakota. Now, we all know that the Red River Valley Fair is coming soon. In fact, we'll be joined by folks from the fair tomorrow to talk about what's going to be some of the star attractions. Well, one of them for me, and I hope for you too, will be happening on July 8th, starting at 3:30 in the Barnyard Bar at the fairgrounds. The Forever Blue Social will be taking place. North Dakota FFA Foundation will be hosting this, so you have the opportunity to connect with fellow FFA alumni, supporters, and friends at this first Forever Blue Social. There'll be refreshments, a whole afternoon of conversation, networking, and celebration, and this is a chance to look at North Dakota FFA's Foundation's vision for the future. North Dakota will celebrate its 100th anniversary of having FFA chartered in this state in 2029. We chartered in 1929. Looking forward to having all of you stick around. If you're interested in attending this Forever Blue Social, you need to email me at ag@flagfamily.com, because when you email me, I have a flyer that I can share with you that is free admission to the fair, this FFA social, and that night's Blackhawk conference. So if you'd like to be attending, like I said, you're going to want to send me that email. Love to have you there, learn more about the programming that happens, what the FFA Foundation does for students in the association, and so much more. So make that a part of your adventures at the Red River Valley Fair coming up this year. Now, so many little things to talk about that are going on in agriculture today. With the U.S. and Iran on again, off again dating relationship, you might say, with opening up the strait, this is very likely to trigger a rush of grain imports to nations in the Persian Gulf after months of reliance on longer, less effective routes. The Gulf is among the world's most import-dependent food markets, and relying on overseas supplies for roughly 90% of food consumption, well, that's been a little tough. Iran alone ranks as the world's largest buyer of soybean meal and is a major importer of corn out of Brazil. So many of the region's main grain import hubs, such as the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and even ports in Iran, they are behind that strait. And that's kept the region's total grain imports well below our historic levels. In May, overall grain imports to the region fell by 942,000 tons. That's down more than 50% from the year prior. Additionally, we have been looking forward to celebrating what's going to be happening on July 4th for the United States. And I talked a little bit about the American flag the other day. More things to know. First of all, American flags have been planted on the moon by, all right, this is going to be kind of a Gaussian guess, Addison. How many different flags have been planted on the moon by separate NASA missions? Any idea?
How many flags on the moon? Well, how many NASA missions to the moon have there been? Did the school system fail me? Don't answer that. That's rhetorical.
This was all done by the Apollo missions. So there are American flags planted on the moon from the crews of the Apollo missions of 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17. So there are 6 different missions that planted flags there.
uneducated question. How many Apollo missions were there?
More than that. I don't have that number in front of me. That's going to be a great Google question for you.
I guess so.
Oh, I love how we can surprise each other on the things that we do or do not know. Have, have you ever been to Washington, D.C.?
No, I have not gone that far in any direction from Minnesota or North Dakota. One day though,
Very
seems
lucky.
like a fun place to visit.
I think you should. I have had the pleasure of being able to go to D.C. a couple times. There are 50 flags that fly 24 hours a day around the base of the Washington Monument, and those are all official U.S. flags. So that's why it looks so pretty flapping in the wind.
Interesting. That's neat.
I remember going to the Washington Monument as a student and being told that when the elevator system was first installed, it was considered very unsafe for women. So men could ride the elevator to the top of the Washington Monument. Women had to walk.
W- w-
You can see my face
what was the logic? Why?
because women could. I mean, if the elevator failed, women would die. So it was easier to make them walk than it was to take the damn elevator.
Checks out. Yeah.
Yeah, this makes complete and utter sense. Okay, well, we'll get back to farming here in a moment. We are going to be joined by our guest today. That's Dr. Emily Fox. She is with the Ashley Veterinarian Clinic, and she will come up after the next chance to hear the livestock report from the American Ag Network. Thanks for being here for Weather and Ag in Focus today, live from, well, a rest stop near Miles City, Montana, because one of us is always on the go, you might say. Going to be heading back, so tomorrow you'll get to hear me back in North Dakota, and I'm looking forward to it. Meanwhile, I have the opportunity today to visit with one of our fan favorites. That's Dr. Emily Fox. She is with the Ashley Veterinarian Clinic in Ashley, North Dakota. Dr. Emily, how are things in your world today?
Pretty good, Bridget. How are you guys?
We're hanging in there quite well. So, we had listeners send in some questions, and that's why I wanted to reach out to you. Um, I don't necessarily need to talk about this, but are you tired of people asking about the screwworm? Or you just decided that we've done enough about that already?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of questions about the screwworm, and rightfully so. It's a pretty concerning issue for a lot of people, and certainly the economic impact is concerning even for people who are not involved with agriculture. So I've even had questions from family members who are not involved with agriculture about what is this? Is it concerning you? I'm certainly concerned. I'm really sad and disappointed because I think we had a really good handle on this problem, and I'm really sad to see it popping back up again. I was pretty impressed with the work we've done over the last 40 to 60 years, trying to push it back. So I'm hopeful that the response will be quick enough that maybe we won't undo all the progress we've done in that time. But I certainly feel bad for my colleagues working in regulatory medicine as well. This is a pretty serious issue, and it definitely creates a lot of problems that we haven't had to deal with in a long time.
Well, I think you make a great point. Folks that are working hard on this, especially in the southern states, this isn't just a simple, hey, let's treat it and go. There's multiple steps to treatment for those animals. And above all, everybody wants to see the animal safe and healthy. That's our bottom line every time. Now, questions that I had from folks, especially as we see the temperature start to jump up to the 90-degree mark next week. Heat stress for cattle. Do we worry about that as much up here? I know when we talk about feedlot situations in Nebraska and Kansas, it's very concerning. How do your producers here in the state feel?
I don't think that we're very fortunate. We don't see usually the crazy heat stress where you have cattle just, up and dying. We're much less of a feedlot state and we're much more of a cow calf state. So we don't have a lot of animals that have quite as much flesh on them. But even when we do, I think people do a pretty good job mitigating that here. We are used to having wild temperature swings. We are used to having both heat and cold. So a lot of the people who do feed cattle in the state have a lot of shade, like they'll have good shade apparatuses, they will have misting systems, those kind of things. They do have something in place. But we're also very lucky that we don't have quite the extremes that those areas usually have. Um, I think heat stress is something where rather than just the heat stress of simply standing around, we also have to talk about heat stress when we're doing things. I take that into account very seriously. So I ultrasound a lot of cows, which is a very early version of pregnancy checking. You're checking these animals when they're under 90 days bred. So my season is actually starting tomorrow. So we'll be doing that pretty
Oh,
soon. And as the temperatures heat up, I really worry about heat stress in those cows. I don't want to cause any early embryonic loss. I also just don't want the cows to, and they definitely look miserable. If anybody's ever worked cows when it's a beautiful 70-degree morning and then something breaks and instead you end up working them at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when it's 95 or 100 degrees out and it's humid, there's a huge difference in how the animals come through, how they behave. And I do think that maybe we should do a better job taking that into account. I know it's a pain in the butt for humans to get up early. I am not a morning person, but I really try to take that into account because not only is it about my comfort and the comfort of the people that are working, but I do think that we have to be cognizant, especially when we're crowding them, we're stressing them, putting them through tubs and alleyways. Maybe they are standing in a hotter environment. Sometimes those are animals that are used to be on grass and now they're standing on black dirt, which can be a pretty big thermal sink there. So I think we have to be cognizant of that when we work our animals and really try to schedule around them. I have occasionally canceled something because of high heat. I particularly think
Mhm.
semen testing bulls in really high heat can have negative effects. I have seen bulls, go down and be really, really uncomfortable afterwards or just lay there and look miserable. And I don't ever want to do that to an animal, especially when it's something that we can schedule around. So I think we have to be really cognizant of that. And I think most people are pretty good about that. I definitely would not sedate animals in super high heat. I really advise against darting with sedation when it's really hot out during the heat of the day and in the sun. You break their ability to thermoregulate when you sedate an animal a lot of the time. And so for a short period of time there, they really can't regulate their body temperature. You really don't want to, say, dart a bull with sedation because he has foot rot and knock out a black bull and leave him laying in the sun for 4 hours, for example, that would have really negative effects. So we really have to be careful about that.
Wow, I never considered that. That's a great point because you think about it, that animal's tired. They're going to lay down. They're not going to think about taking care of themselves, finding some shade or getting into some water to cool off. Oh, that's a really great point. Thank you for sharing that. So, uh, speaking, one short thing before we have our news break, and then I've got some other questions. Warmer in horses and dogs. Is that standard practice? Do you have folks coming in right now doing that for animals because it's summer, or should we be planning for that year round if you are taking care of dogs and horses?
It's a really tough question. It kind of depends on your risk level, especially with horses. When I was a kid, horses, they used to, I don't know if anybody remembers Strongid C2X. It was a daily dewormer that you fed horses. They marketed it really heavily in like the early to mid 2000s. And they paid for colic surgery. If your horse colicked, it was like you got insurance from it. Everybody was on it. And I mean, I'm not going to blame one product for resistance, but I will say nobody was really talking about resistance before that product existed. And then all of a sudden we were talking a lot about resistance in large boarding barns. And I think to some extent, at least, we've really moved away from the daily dewormers or the three-way switch. It used to be pyrantel and fenbendazole and ivermectin, and you would switch every 2 to 3 months. You would do one of the three and you would alternate. We've really moved away from that as an industry because we have seen more resistance come up in particularly in strongyles, but in all worms. Generally, the best standard of care, the gold standard, would be fecal egg count reduction tests. So essentially, you take a fecal, you see if the horses need to be dewormed, you deworm anyone who needs it, and then you take a fecal afterwards to make sure that the wormer worked and that you've reduced the egg load. That being said, for a lot of people, that's prohibitive for a lot of reasons. So if you are going to seasonally deworm, I generally am one to seasonally deworm at the end of the winter around here, and then again after the freeze. The biggest thing that I see particularly is after the freeze, I really like to give my horses a good deworming with an ivermectin containing product. We see a lot of bot flies in this area. You see those little yellow eggs on their legs, and they kind of stick to them. Those are actually the eggs, and they become larvae. And they cause ulcer symptoms. Actually, I saw a horse in school that we scoped for ulcers because the veterinarians that had seen it had thought maybe it has ulcers. It's behaving like its stomach hurts all the time. And there were bots just lining the inside of its stomach, stuck to the stomach wall. And they're really uncomfortable. And if you've ever seen a horse poop out bots, unfortunately I actually have a bot from one of my own horses in my office in a jar if anyone wants to come see it. And they kind of look like a big grub with like an angry little mouth, and they grab on and sucker on to the lining of the stomach, and they're not going to kill your horse, or really even usually they don't cause colic even, but they'll cause those like ulcery symptoms. Horse will just be uncomfortable, a little cinchy, a little weird. And so I think it's important, and it doesn't really pay to try to get rid of the bot, to be as aggressive against bots in the middle of the summer, because generally, they'll just reinfect. So I like to be really aggressive about my bot treatment in the fall. And I think bots are kind of a universal issue in this part of the upper Midwest. And definitely with the cool weather we see here, we have that advantage of being able to know we've killed them after the freeze in the fall. So that's something I really recommend. A lot of the time, I'll also recommend spring deworming, a little bit different schedule if we have young horses. And then with dogs, it's really risk dependent because it depends on if your dog is on heartworm prevention or not. Generally, the AVMA says that all dogs should be on heartworm prevention. There are some exceptions to this rule. I definitely don't want to get into them because I think they should be case by case basis, and you should talk to your veterinarian. There are parts of North Dakota where that's maybe not indicated, and it depends on your vet, your dog, your travel history, etc. But for the most part, generally, the statement by AVMA is all dogs should be on heartworm prevention all year. Heartworm preventatives generally have deworming components in them and do deworm your dog. So if your dogs are on those, you shouldn't have too much of a problem. We also get away sometimes with seasonal flea and tick in North Dakota, which most of the rest of the country, they're doing flea and tick year round as well. Ticks, we're really not seeing in my part of North Dakota, at least, a lot of deer ticks with Lyme disease yet, but there definitely are more and more tick-borne diseases that are becoming an issue. So I think tick prevention is incredibly important. There's a lot of different products out there, and every pet's a little different in terms of what's going to be the best option for them, depending on their health concerns. So it's definitely something. Talk to your veterinarian. Don't just, especially the ones that are over the counter now, a lot of them there's a lot of resistance. They're not very potent. Talk to your veterinarian when you're in and get a plan together for flea and tick. I know some people are like, oh, it might be more at the vet, whatever. Usually it isn't, but also if cost is a concern, let us know. Most people are like, oh, that's fine. We're supposed to offer you gold standard, but most of us are very willing to come up
Sure.
with a different protocol that's going to work for your budget as well. But flea and tick prevention, especially this year, I'm seeing a lot more ticks already. So I would definitely be keeping up on your flea and tick.
Oh, those are great, solid pieces of advice right there. Now, we have a chance to hear the news, but then I have some questions about dust pneumonia in calves. So we'll catch up with Dr. Emily Fox with the Ashley Veterinarian Clinic after the news. I'm so glad to be on air today from Montana. My guest, Dr. Emily Fox, she is also traveling today. She's in a vehicle. Addison is wondering if he can somehow Photoshop the two of us together so it looks like we're sitting side by side in the same car, Emily.
Ask you if you happen to be in Bismarck, because I thought, oh, we could have just gotten in the same vehicle for this interview. But
You
unfortunately, it sounds
know,
like you're not in Bismarck.
I'm almost to Miles City. If I'd have driven faster, we could have made this work. So that's on me.
We could have had lunch.
Maybe I should give a shout out to the guys from Red E. Would they do the air seeder repair? We've been tech teaming it down the interstate all day long to get it together. So it's been working great. So, Emily, question for you. Dust pneumonia in calves. Folks are wondering, how does that happen, and is it very common when it comes to calves, or is it seasonal depending on our weather for the year?
So, at least in my experience, and granted, I don't live in the dustiest part of the state, so other people may have different opinions on this, but I definitely think dust pneumonias happen. I think a lot more pneumonias get attributed to just dust than really are caused by dust, if that makes sense. Certainly, when
Mm-hmm.
we see drier, dustier conditions, we can see some inflammation of the airways causing pneumonia, but a true dust pneumonia would almost be a sterile pneumonia with no bacterial or viral component. Most pneumonias, when I go and do nasal swabs on pneumonia calves, which I frequently do, I really strongly believe in not just guessing, especially not only from an antibiotic suitability and stewardship component, but also just in terms of being efficacious with our treatment, putting those dollars to work in an appropriate manner. I think it's really good to know what the causative agent of a pneumonia is. Most often, I do see a bacterial or a viral component. I see a lot of bacterial pneumonias. I see a fair amount of pasteurellosis. I see a fair amount of actually bovine coronavirus, which is something that I think a lot of people maybe don't touch on. It is kind of a pathogen that wasn't really prioritized 10 years ago, and I think people still aren't really looking at it. I also see a lot of mycoplasmal pneumonias. So certainly, I think it's absolutely, reasonable to say that the dust is probably contributing. The dust may be creating airway inflammation that's allowing these pathogens to set up shop and do their thing. But I think most pneumonias are pathogenic. And I think it's important not to just, I think, yes, the weather can make those things a lot worse, but I think also it's kind of a cop out to just say, oh, it's the weather, it's dusty, like whatever. I think those things merit more investigation. And I think certainly then we should be looking into why we have pneumonias. I think that's where things like nasal swabbing, necropsy, all of those type of sample generation things could be really helpful.
Once again, paying attention to your herd, right? Knowing what the status is of the animals. If you start to see something like this that's spreading rapidly, you need to take a different tactic than just allowing it to run its course, perhaps. Oh, did we lose Dr. Emily? Well, that's okay. She will probably be coming right back into us because we have further questions for her today. And while Emily has a chance to reconnect, which is just fine, we did get most of that question answered with her, which I truly appreciate her time. I will fill in with a few other items. So first of all, let's talk about, let me get to one more little item here. Northland potato growers and their Growers Association and the Potato Bowl USA Committee have announced scholarship winners that happened within each organization. They named 3 applicants, or 3 winners of all the applications. Now, applicants must be the children or grandchildren of potato grower members or associates, and each can earn a $2,500 scholarship to the college or university of their choice. One of those winners, Brooke Gullickson. Brooke is a graduate of the Edinburgh Valley High School, and she is looking to go to UND studying nutrition and dietetics. That's going to include some discussion in regards to potatoes. She's originally from Hoople. Also, Madeline Hoverson, she is from Larimore. She's a student at UND. She studies biology and psychology, and she's on the pre-med track. Passionate about healthcare, coming from a farm background near Larimore. And then lastly is Molly Bjornaby. She is of Grafton, North Dakota. She's currently attending Valley City State University. She's majoring in exercise science, and she's on the pre-physical therapy track. And her goal is to help expand access to physical therapy in rural communities after she graduates, which is a tremendous accomplishment for her. I applaud her so much. Dr. Emily is back able to join us, and one more question for you, if we could, and that is, recently I talked a little bit about the fact that when it comes to foals with horses, and I call it calving with cattle, I guess I can call it foaling with horses, there's some big differences in the gestation period, how critical it is for a quick situation when that mare is having the foal. Could you explain that to listeners just a little bit, some of those differences between the two?
Sure. So, horses, first of all, have a little bit different gestational length than cattle. Not as long as, say, like a camel or something like that, but still a long gestation length. Cattle are, depending on who you ask, anywhere from 175 to 283 days. They can go a couple weeks in either direction from that, but generally not much more than that. Um, Cattle, they stick to their due dates pretty well. Horses, on the other hand, and 283 days, sorry, would be about 9 months. Horses, on the other hand, they take about 11 months generally, about 340. And horses can go as much as a year. There's quite a bit of variation in when they are going to foal. They have a little bit more control, is my understanding as well. They like if a horse wants to foal at night, she will hold on to that foal and foal at night, whereas a cow kind of has a lot less control over the factor of when it's going to come out. One of the biggest
Mm-hmm.
differences is the type of placenta they have. So cattle have a cotyledonary placenta. They have cotyledons and caruncles, the buttons that hold the placenta to the inside of the mare and or inside of the cow, excuse me. And so you can kind of see those buttons on the outside of the uterus, and the placenta is connected in that way. Horses have a diffuse placenta, so it's kind of just loosely connected all over. So their placentas are a lot different, and that kind of changes the dynamics of how they give birth, how they clean, how their placentas come out. So generally, cattle give birth a lot slower. It can take several hours for them to kind of warm up and start labor. The labor process in horses is a lot faster. I think this may have to do with kind of the fact that foals are up and ready to run very quickly after birth. And I think that horses have kind of evolved to be ready to get away from predators as fast as possible and kind of dump their foal, get up and run away with it. But horses generally, they have much stronger contractions and they tend to push their foals out very fast. They should be out really, if it's more than an hour, you really have there's problems going on probably. And generally the contractions are a lot stronger. Sticking your arm in a mare, you could get your arm broken. Sticking your arm in a cow is common. Their fetuses also
Whoa.
present a lot differently. So they always say, like, in a cow, a dystocia or a fetal malpositioning is it's serious, but most cattlemen can correct some of them themselves, right? And they're not uncommon, and they're also not always life ending or life threatening. For example, a big cow can give birth to a calf that's backwards sometimes without any help, which is, some I wouldn't advise that if possible, but definitely can happen. That doesn't really happen in horses. The foals have much longer, much more gangly legs. They really need to be in that diving position before they come out, or there's a lot of problems. So they always say a horse having trouble foaling is always a serious emergency, whereas a cow having trouble calving is an emergency, but it's much different in the sense that a lot of the time it's something that I could walk a producer through how to correct on the phone. Also,
Mm-hmm.
C-sections are a lot more complex in horses. They have a lot less space between their last rib and their hip than a cow would. And um, they don't really have the room in there to kind of hold everything out of the way like a cow would. So it's a much more complex thing. So horse C-sections are generally done on midline. You have to lay them down. It's very serious. I've actually never, granted, most of my practice is beef cattle, but I've never done
Mm-hmm.
or assisted with a equine C-section. They're much more complex surgeries. Whereas a bovine C-section is very routine for me. I've done more than one in a day. We're at the end of calving season and I did one last Saturday. Like it's not an abnormal thing. I've done them in complete darkness. I've done them in the dirt. Like cows are much more resilient as well. They're much more less likely to get peritonitis. So, if you told me your horse needed a C-section, your cow needed a C-section, you said which one's going to be the more successful surgery, at least in my hands and in the hands of most people, the cow C-section is the less complex surgery, certainly. And generally a horse C-section, most like horse vets that just do travel and horse work, a lot of them would not try to attempt that in the field. It's pretty rare to see a field C-section in a horse. Generally, you try to get it to a hospital, and it's a very, very serious problem when they have trouble. Sometimes hard to catch horses foaling because they push so fast. I foaled out the first horse to ever foal at my farm last year for a friend of mine, and I got lucky. I saw her foal, but gosh, she pushed that baby out fast, and I kind of held the end of it because I was trying to make sure the bag wasn't over its nose, and she pushed with a lot more force than I'm used to with cattle. It is a little
Uh-huh.
bit different the way they labor. It's very intense. So I think
I
those are some
so
of the big differences.
those are great explanations, and I got to tell you, I love the fact that you share kind of the nitty gritty of that. That it's completely different. There's a difference in the size and the weight. And like you said, there's nights you have to be doing this in the dark in awful conditions, and you're making sure those calves get home safely every day. So thank you for that, Emily. Thanks for taking the time to join us today and answer all those listener questions. Really greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You too. All right. For those who are watching on the live stream, you're having fun when every so often, we're not sure why, but the video will seize up a little bit and then it sort of fast forwards. So I feel like a Muppet, but it's good entertainment for those watching. And we'll have more entertainment when we return and a last check of the weather. Well, just in case you're out hauling manure today, there is a forecast for that. So, for your manure hauling forecast, we are hoping to hit maybe the upper 70s today, get to about a 78-degree range, overnight lows in the 50s. Tomorrow, late in the day, brings us some showers. There's about a 40% chance of that, and highs mid 70s again. Some rain over into Saturday, where Saturday is going to get to 85, but Sunday, starting off the week with a 90-degree temperature, Monday, 96. I recommend that find some shade and hydrate well. Maybe some sunscreen on Monday for anybody outside. Tuesday is going to be hit a high of about 88, and Wednesday again will be 90 degrees. And our temperatures at night are staying up over 60 degrees as well, starting on Friday. What does that mean? That means that we see more growing season for our corn, right? And our soybeans and other crops, because when the temperatures stay warmer at night, the plant doesn't shut down in the evenings. It will continue to grow through that warm weather. Today has been talking a lot about livestock with our previous guest, Dr. Emily Fox. And June is Dairy Month, and I'm happy to help us continue to celebrate June. And we're going to do that by talking about some famous cows. So, most recently, the most expensive cow ever sold at auction was Viatina 19. That's her name, Viatina 19. She is worth $4 million and is constantly watched over by her own armed guard, security cameras, and veterinarian, plus flocks of people who come to see a magnificent cow. She has taken social media by storm. Someday we will look back at her as well as many other cows in bovine history. Other cows like that, well, you may have heard of Elm Farm Ollie, or if you didn't, back in 1930, she was the first cow to fly in an airplane and be milked during flight. Quite a unique and whimsical milestone for both ag as well as aviation. And this happened when she was flown from the city of Bismarck, Missouri to St. Louis, which is a distance of 72 miles. This was part of the International Air Exposition in St. Louis. Then there is Maudine Ormsby. She's a cow who was very remarkable. Award winning. A Holstein. I'm sorry, Addison, she's not a milking shorthorn, but a Holstein.
One day.
One day we'll find one for you. So back in 1921, Maudine won the world record for her ability to produce 743.5 pounds of milk and 28.7 pounds of butter fat during a 7-day test. That's tremendous, but it's not what made her famous. This Holstein has a very unique place in college history. She is the only cow to be elected homecoming queen. Her election at Ohio State University in 1926 is a legendary example of a prank that became very much a cherished part of the university's lore. I don't think anybody was expecting me to say homecoming queen at that point for Maudine the cow, but it's funny. But sadly, poor Maudine, she passed away when she was 7 years old. She contracted brucellosis, which is a very highly contagious disease. And she is still a reminder that sometimes the most memorable and cherished moments come from the unexpected. If you, as a child, remember Borden dairy products, maybe you remember that evaporated milk or sweetened condensed milk your mom had in the cupboard. The cow on the label, she has a name. Her name is Elsie the cow. She's the daisy necklace wearing cow that became a marketing icon beginning back in 1939. Elsie, as a real cow, her real name was Lobella, and Lobella was what Daisy was based off, or excuse me, Elsie was based off on Borden products. Back in 1939, the real Lobella was chosen for her disposition, and she was quite photogenic, and she made it to New York's World Fair. And that's where people started to learn the most about her as the cultural icon that she came to be. And then lastly, Pauline Wayne. Who names these cows? But she was a Holstein, and she was a gift to President William Howard Taft's administration from 1910 to 1913. She was a fresh source of milk, and also she was brought to replace Mooly Wooly, the previous White House cow. There was a whole lineage of cows that served the White House throughout those early years. In fact, Pauline, she had a whole book written about her life story. I bet it's quite entertaining. Last headline we want to touch on today is what's going on in India. The world's second largest sugar exporter, India is expected to have little surplus for export for at least 3 more seasons as El Nino weather conditions threaten cane production, and rising ethanol demand squeezes down their supply. The twin pressures are poised, poised to keep millions of tons of sugar off the world market and tighten supplies for importers across Asia, Africa, as well as the Middle East. An absence by India from export markets would remove a key balancing supplier as weather risks shape sugar trade. All right, we're good. And Jay Thomas is going to be coming up next. I got a little catch in my throat, but I'll see you all tomorrow.